Welcome to the Myopia podcast, where we give you the latest myopia research, clinical topics, and industry insights. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all awesome myopia content. And now to our host, a massive myopia manager himself, Dr. David Kading.
Thanks again for joining us. I'm here with my buddy Jagrut Lallu, and we have got to know each other kind of over the years, but just about 6 months ago, I got to come down and visit you in New Zealand.
Yeah, it was great.
Awesome.
It was actually fantastic having you come over. For lots of us at the conference, it was a real sort of game-changing experience. Certainly for my clinical practice, having you come down and, teach us what you're doing in America, changed the way that we practice now in our clinic. So to the point where it's actually helped increase our patient care. And certainly when you follow the care, the revenue follows.
Yeah.
So we had privately, I spoke to you, as you know, with quite a significant change just from a couple of learnings from your lectures. So yeah, it was fantastic.
That's
so thank
awesome.
you for coming.
Yeah, it was a blast. I was so honored that I got to do so. And anytime, people don't do this, is go to other countries. You guys do a little bit more often, is go to other countries for CE. But in the States, we got so much of it. And in Canada, that's just kind of what we do. But when you get outside of North America and you go see other meetings and how people are doing things, it just opens your mind to all these incredible opportunities.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always found when I come to the US is that, you guys have this whole massive discussion around insurance. Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas in New Zealand, everything is essentially private pay.
Yeah.
So it's like the opposite. We have no idea what this insurance game even is.
Yeah.
Whereas you guys, it's like a big discussion point for independent practice, and corporate practice is quite different.
Yeah.
So it's always good to learn, and but the pearls are universal.
Yeah.
Like the way you run your practice and the way you manage myopia, your scholarships, the way you approach dry eye. It was just really refreshing to hear, because we sit in these offices and these four walls, and we never really talk to each other,
right?
Unless you go to a physical conference, and that's probably the benefit of having, not having COVID anymore.
That's right. Yeah. So for people who don't know you, you practice. You've got this clinical practice is just fantastic in New Zealand, and then you've got also started iSpace or the orthokeratology world. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But tell me a little bit about your practice and your introduction into myopia management, and how you've and I know because I was there and I saw other people interacting with you. You're helping lead the way in New Zealand and in Australia and what you're doing. So tell us a little bit about your practice.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. We have a practice that has 8 optometrists in a single practice. So there are 4 consulting rooms that run full time. Then 6 optometrists work sort of through that period through that part of the practice.
6 optometrists work in 4 rooms.
Correct. Yeah. So we don't want to work too hard. So you want to have people working a bit part time. So because you need clinical practice can be pretty busy when you're seeing between 15 and 20 patients a day, or sometimes 30 if you're doing lots of contact lens reviews, as you know, with a busy practice. And so so that's one part of the business. Then over the road from the business, in a separate building, we have the New Zealand Eye Research Centre. So that's where we do clinical trial work and are trying to do things that are like passion projects, so that you want to sort of give back to the ophthalmic community. And so, for example, if you wanted to know the incidence of myopia or prevalence of myopia in New Zealand, well, that might be a passion project that we do that industry has indirectly helped us pay for, because we're doing the clinical trials to bring money in, and then we can fund PhD students or fund research. Yeah. So that's been quite a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And then we have in our clinic in 2009, I set up the first myopia control clinic. So in New Zealand. So what that means is we have, at the time we were prescribing atropine, Ortho-K. There were no real glasses options then, but product came out from Zeiss, and so we started using that. And then around about 2012, John Phillips and Nicola Anstis invented the MySight contact lens, and so we had early access to that. And so we've been fitting a lot of these things for a very long time. More recently, we're delving into reviewing red light therapy. And so what we're looking at now with all of our myopia management patients is actually incorporating choroidal thickness and OCT.
Yeah.
So you're doing your axial lengths, you're doing all your other standard checks. Then we're also adding in collecting OCT data, and we're going to review that on our Spectralis.
Yeah. So one of the things you presented at in New Zealand was on red light therapy, and we've had other red light therapy discussions on the podcast, and I would say they've leaned in an opposite direction of where you spoke of during your presentation. And so I'm excited to have another conversation with you where we delve more into that, how you're using it and how it's starting to work in your practice. So that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, there's a lot of conjecture in the scientific community. Like one concept that we want to probably discuss is, does it need to be a laser? Could it just be a red light? Part of the process, it appears to be, as it looks like it's intentionally creating inflammation with a healing response that then reduces the axial length by potentially, increasing choroidal thickness and or remodeling the sclera.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a possible association with it. So what we're doing to make sure that we're practicing safely is we're using our Spectralis to do choroidal thickness and reviewing that quite closely. So the patients have reviewed very closely for visual acuity changes, retina changes, basically anything we can find. And so far, because we've seen the most patients outside of China in the world for red light therapy, so far, everyone's doing fantastically well. Where I'll probably see it, whether it's a laser or a red light, I'll probably see it fitting in with, if you would have wanted to have complete control of myopia, you'd probably do a light-based therapy and, say, Ortho-K. So you're free during the day of glasses, you've got complete control, and you then can just live your normal life.
Yeah.
The other thing that was really interesting recently at the IMC conference was the talk around 7-methylxanthine again. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about you is that you've worked to try to make this simpler. Like in the world of orthokeratology, one of the things that I've discovered is, and I think this is the reason why more people don't do it, is we try to make it harder and harder and harder and tweak and see these patients back for 17 visits and all the lectures I see outside of, conferences that are focused on orthokeratology is how to troubleshoot, right?
Yeah.
And that just says that there's lots of problems to somebody who's not doing it. So you've been somebody who's like, hey, we got to make this simpler.
Yeah. So that's part of how we sort of came up with iSpace or the software that's related to it. So first of all, we recognize that, what are the barriers to practitioners? Like we actually want practitioners to confidently prescribe things like orthokeratology or rigid contact lenses, just like they would a pair of spectacles or soft contact lenses, okay? It's got to be that easy, right? So what we did was we looked at what the main barriers are. Well, one of the barriers is that, the fitting process. The fitting process entails physically, or used to entail physically putting a trial lens on eye, assessing the fluorescein fit, and then deciding whether or not we're going ahead. It's all chair time. It's a lot more time. It's much more difficult if you're in a corporate setting to integrate this model in, if you run by KPIs or managers and things like that. So we removed that whole step. So what we did was we designed software where you use a topography to design the lens, so topography-based lens design. And then now we've integrated this with a whole bunch of machines. So the newest generation of these profilometers, so you've got like an eaglet eye, for example, or the Silite machine, which is here today for the first time in the US, that's using OCT-based fitting or hyperparallel OCT. We've got things like the Pentacam now, which integrate in the software. So all these new machines are making life a lot easier for things like scleral lens fitting as well as rigid lens fitting.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does the system work? So those people who have never heard of iSpace, it's a completely different way of fitting than maybe most people, learned on Paragon CRT in the States. That was the common one. Now a ton of people are using Euclid. I think those are two of the top ones in the States.
Yeah. So the main thing is it's actually a complete turnkey approach. So we've thought of everything and to make the whole process simpler. So whether it's education, so we have a full knowledge base, or a learning management system where you can get certification, it's interactive, it's easy, it's fun. Whether it's having a track and trace system on your ordering of your lenses, so once you've ordered your lenses, well, where are they? Well, you don't want your staff having to call the lab all the time. Well, you don't want your doctors ringing up consultants all the time. Well, we've got a Facebook style troubleshooting system. So you look at your order online, it's all safe and compliant, where you can then interact with the consultants just by sending a little message, or dropping in files, and then it's all secure in one place. There's no more emails. You can probably tell how many emails you get in a day, to the point where you have an assistant who does all of the emails for you now. So these are these little things, but the main thing is you import a corneal topography from your chosen device. You type in a spectacle prescription and measure an HVID, and then you simply click design and then order. Add to the shopping cart, design the left lens, add to the shopping cart, and click order. And everything else is taken care of. And if you do that, 90% of the time, the lens will work.
Yeah. So are you needing to go in and modify all the parameters of the lens?
No. So you don't have to modify parameters. You can if you like. So there is customization available for you as an expert doctor. So you may go to a research paper and learn that if I customize a lens like this, I'm going to get more control of this, okay, or that. Well, you can do that if you want. But for the majority of people who just want a lens to work, remembering, of course, that all orthokeratology is already controlling myopia. We don't necessarily have to get all complicated about it, like you were saying before, to make, that where you have to do more customization. You can just let it do its thing. And then if in the future you're getting uncontrolled myopia because of axial length progression or something else, well, then we can look at customization.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that's available. So it's otherwise the standard template works.
It's really a turnkey customized approach, because the topography is what is guiding the design of the system through artificial intelligence and so forth. So it's designing a lens based off that topography automatically on its own, with around about a 90% success rate right off the bat.
That's right. Yeah. And that's we've been in the game for, the best part of 12, 14 years now. And so we did this approach way back in 2010, 12 sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got more data than anyone else. So then that means our developers can look at, exciting, wonderful things. When you look at big data now, that's what the whole world's buzzing about, with machine learning and things like that. So it puts us in a really good position in terms of how we can make it even better for practitioners. Yeah. So the fun project to look at is, what about the ones that didn't work? Right. And then these supercomputers can look at, well, how do we get that example? And if we get another map like that again in the future, maybe we can just skip to lens 3 as opposed to going to lens 1.
Right. So I was presenting on artificial intelligence in New Zealand, and I was talking about how in the future we're going to be able to have so many designs incorporated into software that someday the computers will be able to better design lenses. And then Jagrut came up to me and he's like, "Hey, buddy, we're doing that right now." It's kind of like, oh my goodness, right? And it's because you're able to collect all of that data. It's all secure. There's nobody's patient's names on it or anything, but just looking at the topography. But it's really cool to be able to say, and you guys don't promote this as much as I think you probably should, but it's artificial intelligence designed lenses. And that's like the buzzword of today, but you've been doing it for 12 years. And that's the cool thing, is it just keeps getting better and better and better.
Yeah, and it's really exciting because, there's a lot of cool stuff that we want to do. And we've just got a big development backlog, and you just go through the process and do all of those sorts of things. So, for us now, it's about growing into different markets and helping more people. Mm-hmm. So we actually just focus on the process and removing the barriers, and then everything else just sort of sorts itself out.
Slides into place.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast and sharing anything that we haven't talked about that you want to mention or bring up.
I just want to say one thing, and that's around, so I do some work in advocacy. So, for the World Council of Optometry as a myopia ambassador in the IMI. And one of the big things we're trying to work on right now is how to build confidence in practitioners to maybe take this next step and maybe, manage myopia and things like that. So if there are any barriers for your audience, it'd be great if they left a note in the comments for you, like where they're struggling or where they're missing in confidence, because we're trying really hard to address that.
Yeah.
And we're looking at maybe an IMI white paper that actually talks about patient communication, things like that, to help hold people's hands. And I think your platform's a really good platform for that, because like we were talking about before, you're not really going to be listening to the Myopia podcast unless you're actually interested in myopia and its management, What we're also trying to do is get industry on board to support initiatives like this. Okay, this is really important to us because we're going to solve this problem together. Okay, and that requires investment from industry for initiatives like funding podcasts, like holding conferences, things like that, so we can get everyone in the conversation.
Right.
So it's not a simple solution. So maybe the thing is we talk a little bit more, or one of your guests could be like Olga Pranat, who's, looking after GMAC at the moment. Yeah. But maybe we need a bigger group that's for other parts of the world. So my area is Asia Pac that I've got to sort out, and that's a massive area to cover. Yeah.
Well, I'd venture to guess that there's less than 15,000 practitioners worldwide that are doing myopia management. I completely just pulled that out of the air, but I think it's probably less than that are seeing more than 100 or 200 patients a year. We got to get way more than that. And so what are the barriers? We've got to continue to find those. Places like GMAC, IMI, the World Council of Optometry are really helping to dig into what those problems are, which I'm super grateful for. We've got, as many people on my podcast know, we've got a workshop to reduce barriers of like, how do you implement it into your practice, figuring out the costs and how to convert patients and those sort of things.
So when's that coming up?
Yeah, so depending on when you're listening to the workshop, we're going to be having, several of them all throughout the year. Okay. We've got our first one, which at the time of this recording is in December in Bellevue 2024, but we will be having others throughout the year that we're going to be having.
Oh, great. That's
Very
fantastic.
Intended purpose is to reduce those barriers for people. Yeah.
So one of the things we've got that may be a helpful resource for this workshop is the WCO Myopia Navigator, and it's just it's a web-based tool.
Yep.
It just helps people.
And how can people find it?
So they go to if you just search up Myopia Navigator online through the WCO, it'll come up, and it's really easy to access. It's a free resource. Yep. And it's updated with the current science. Yeah. So you know how our patients search on Google and then they come to you and tell you what's wrong with them? Well, the internal goal is for us to actually have our practitioners like yourself, you're the single source of truth. And so when you have this something like a Myopia Navigator, you can give it to it's for your practitioners, right? Right. But patients are now getting so savvy that they're searching up these things with limited knowledge. You may as well just give them access to something like this. It's a free tool, and they can actually learn for themselves. And then they come and you have a more helpful conversation, which really helps their care.
Yeah. So that's the World Council of Optometry, the Myopia Navigator. It's a great resource. Thank you, man. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for being on the podcast and sharing your perspectives, and make sure to like and subscribe. Do me a favor and go into your favorite podcast format and leave a review and give us a 5-star. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Myopia Podcast.
Thank you very much. Bye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you for tuning in to the Myopia Podcast. If you enjoy our content, please leave a 5-star review and don't forget to subscribe for more great episodes.